Zeke, you had something else?
I just wanted to say that I think that we don't want to sell children short either, because at our task force meeting, I forget which person said it, but children don't like riding in a car seat, and they learn.
Right.
And they don't like walking. I taught 6th grade one year at a county school, and like my class had to walk on the 3rd block from the wall to not bump the other side coming up the hall opposite us. They learn to walk on the 3rd block. You know, children learn to stand in line and wait their turn to get their lunch. They learn how to ask for the lunch. I think children will do what we teach them, and when we reinforce it properly,
They don't just role
we
models.
don't make it a conflict situation, I think they'll all be fine.
And I hope that's the case. I was,
Well, and you always have 1 or 2 kids who don't want to do anything. You say that's just human nature, and we're used to working with a child who's just really, for whatever reason, is being oppositional. I mean, they could be afraid, they could not feel well that day. You know, we're used to that. Ms. Jones said at our in a note to us she wasn't able to attend, but she was sent a nice write-up to our task force. And I think it was Ms. Jones who said that one of the things that this allows us to do is to teach children compassion for others. Am I right, Ms. Jones?
Yes, and just for the record, my aunt died that day.
I'm so
I was
sorry.
with her.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. We didn't know why, but it was a really
You mean
nice...
to read it, what she said? This is what Mrs. Jones allowed me to read to the task force that day. I think that taking the well-being of students, faculty, and staff into account, that the best decision is to require masks at all times, except for those that have medical, developmental, or emotional reasons not to do so. Taking care of others is an important lesson to teach children of all ages. We as adults must be willing to do all that we can to protect ourselves and others. And this was early in the morning, and she had some family things going on that morning. So I did read it with her permission to our task force.
and so, again, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you got to
I was going to say that, again, and my point I was making, it's not that I'm siding with one way or the other. My concern is just how they're going to process and deal with it, you know. So I want everybody to be safe. I want to take the best measure possible. I do also want, and I go back to the 2 options, the one with the more flexibility seemed to be more attainable, easily for us to meet that, you know, and not that that's the right one, and we could probably do fine with option 1 if that's the way we go. I just didn't want to set ourselves up. You know, that was my concern too.
I understand.
And Ms. Zeke's point is well taken. We do things. They learn from what they see. You know, that's a great point. So.
And the only thing I want to say, because what Ms. Zeke said was true, it's all on how we present the information to kids, especially if you talk, you know, it's all on how we present it, the training that occurs, the innovation. One thing that I recommend, I was thinking about this because I'm around kids all the time, you know, it's not just special ed kids that need to get ready and wear a mask. We need to strongly encourage all families that have kids.
To prepare their children.
Yes, to prepare their children.
Right.
I think that would be good if we choose to go this route.
Like, one of the assumptions though was anyone with a severe medical condition that may affect breathing. How far are we going to go with that? I mean, if someone has asthma, are we going to say?
I think if you continue reading, the American Academy of Pediatrics says specifically asthma, allergies, and sinus infections are not a contraindication of using a face mask, covering or mask. I think that there will be some asthmatics that may have significant issues, but I don't think that. I had a son with asthma. I think he could wear a mask if he was still in school right now. I think we'll just have to watch and monitor all of our students. I'm not a medical expert. We did have a staff member ask Ann May what she thought about wearing face coverings. We have not heard from Dr. Ballou yet, but if Ms. Hale doesn't mind responding, she did speak to Ann May about wearing face coverings. She is a pediatric family nurse practitioner. So Ms. Hale, do you mind me putting you on the spot?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
She did say that she was in support of it. The American Academy of Pediatrics has changed their stance just recently, and I have done a lot of research on the asthmatic piece of that. And actually, doctors feel that asthmatics, if they can, should wear ones and that they don't contract this virus, because if they do contract this virus, it can be significantly worse for them. So if at all possible, it would be case-by-case basis, and a school nurse would have to work with that child's physician to determine the best route for that child. I was just going to say, this is a respiratory condition. Being an asthmatic my entire life, I don't want to be anywhere in a confined space with people without wearing one. I avoided our board meetings for 2 months for that very reason. I stayed in my home for 2 months. It takes some getting used to, but my daughter, who is a nurse, has continually told me, we are never going to flatten the curve if we do not wear masks. And it's not because you are protecting yourself from getting it, you're protecting spreading it to others because you may be asymptomatic and not giving any indication that you're a carrier. And children are known to be those types of carriers. And I think that for me, that was my fear about going out, was I knew how hard it is to breathe anyway, and then to think about getting that condition on top of my asthma. And I would venture to say that most asthmatics and parents of asthmatics would have that same feeling. But you take your inhaler, you do all sorts of things to avoid. When I was young, I had to wear a mask to brush my horse. I mean, and that was 70s, so I don't know. I think that, and they have come back and reversed that. So, and that's the only reason I came out, because I wear my mask.
And I also know that another reason I somewhat changed my decision-making process was because I'm also worried about the flu season. And if you've heard anything about what they're anticipating with flu and COVID-19, we did have to shut down 2 days last year. We probably should have shut down more, but I held my feet firm to the ground and probably shouldn't have. But I am very worried about an early onset of flu and COVID-19 and would like to do everything possible. I think this is one way that possibly could help, but it is a tough decision to make. It's not one that I made easily. I did kind of change my thought process because I do think that this is one thing that we could do to make everyone safe. And I'm just gonna tell y'all a personal story, and you probably don't want to hear it. But my niece went to UNC Chapel Hill 2 weeks ago and went to a dorm to live, and now they're shutting down UNC because of the COVID-19 outbreak. And she doesn't know if she's going to get to stay. This is her first time away to college. We were all excited. And now and I know they're college students, they're not high school or elementary students, but because people wouldn't wear their mask, now they might shut down that whole university because of some people that didn't, and their case numbers have risen tremendously in 2 weeks at UNC Chapel Hill. So it's happening everywhere. You've seen the pictures of the Georgia high school where nobody had on a mask, and then they've had so many outbreaks. And of course, we weren't going to be that kind of school division. We were going to have a mask policy, and we were going to socially distance. But I think the socially distance plus this possible mandatory mask policy might make us as healthy as we can be in Covington City Schools.
Can we compare and contrast? Because my understanding of what we had in place already was that masks were going to be required on buses and the hallways. And then I believe we either put down in print or it was agreed among the principals that once in the classroom, the teacher then had discretion about masks and that was to be enforced as classroom policy.
And that was what was in the July 21st?
Right.
That was exactly what we had proposed.
Do we anticipate a lot of extra chatter, maybe? Because we were just talking about, mitigating circumstances, I'm not even sure about severe medical conditions. It sounds like that's going to be determined as we go. So whether it be, and mask breaks, I'm just worried that there will be some people under a mandatory policy, if it's felt, if a given teacher determines that, hey, it looks like all of my students here need a break, take your mask off, cool off, maybe it's a warm day. Are they going to be breaking the very policy that we've set in place because we're making a blanket policy for everything?
I don't see it as a break in the policy. I just think it's common sense but that could be put in the policy, that there could be mask breaks, but I don't know that would validate the whole process or invalidate.
We as school board members try to take as light of a policy hand as we can as it impacts the actual classrooms. So I'm sort of thinking of it, another example of something that we would do from a board level to tell teachers, this is what you must do in your classroom. There are those things, for certain, but it seemed to me that the policy that we had in place gave teachers the discretion to, whether it be they had a pre-existing health condition or whatever the case may be, that they could tell the students, hey, while you're in this classroom, we're going to wear a mask.
And that could have been the case, but we also thought that would be what you said originally, hard to enforce and hard to make people realize we meant business by our policy. But Mrs. Zeke would...
I was going to say that it's always easier to lighten up than it is to tighten up, people at this point have been calling, they've been messaging me, there have been discussions around with me as CEA that even some of the folks who filled out the survey just a week ago or so with Ms. Nee Johnson have now been reading more reports, have seen the news change, and in truth, you're afraid. And they also have felt that without a mandatory policy, it is harder to enforce. So if it's mandatory, it's easier to say, as the teacher, the policy is we're all going to wear masks, with the exception of those who have a note from their doctor or whatever wording we're going to use. Kids accept that. They already accept children who have other medical disabilities or IEPs for learning needs, and that kid gets up and leaves or whatever. It also takes it off of us whether or not we have to be responsible for determining who gets to wear a mask or who doesn't wear a mask. By saying that the masks are required, there's the line, and then we have the health policy exception. Breaks aren't going to all be taken in the room, and teachers have already talked about this. Everyone in the room is not going to take off their mask in the room. There's a chance to go to the bathroom 2 or 3 at a time, take your mask off, go down the hall and come back, things like that. But it's harder to manage who should be wearing a mask and who shouldn't when it's not mandatory. Because we get lists of people who have medical issues and we'll know those kids. And kids will just accept that. They just do.
I was just, again, with the existing policy, I had envisioned a situation, much like any other policy that you would have had as a student, to where when you walk into that classroom that a teacher has a certain expectation, whatever that may be. And that allowing teachers the flexibility to implement that as they saw fit was adequate as far as the mask goes.
I understand.
Especially given, and I'm sorry to interrupt, especially given that we've taken one solid mitigation strategy in socially distancing the classrooms. And as Bert alluded to earlier, even as adults, we all understand that wearing a mask for a 6 or 8 hour stretch is not always the most comfortable thing, even for adults who may fully understand all of the reasons that we have behind it, but it's still, it's distracting at worst, maybe, or at a minimum sometimes.
And you will create a situation also where, regardless, actually, whether it's option 1 or option 2, whether what we decided, they go to Ms. Hale's class and she's a proponent of the mask, and she's like, you're going to wear your mask in my classroom, there's no question. And they leave that block and they go to the next day to Ms. Zeke's class, and everybody's like, ooh, we're going to Zeke's class, we can take our mask off. So that could be a scenario that gets created too, where you don't have a staff member that is
On board.
adhering.
On board.
And then you have parents, whether they agree or disagree, then we're creating that situation too. Not that I'm saying that, I'm just saying so we're prepared
Right,
for
we're
it.
right.
That's it. Not that that's going to happen or one's going to take whatever stance. We just need to be prepared because that's a situation that, unfortunately, that it's also called.
And let's just take it one step further. If you use Ms. Zeke again. Let's suppose Ms. Zeke was one of those teachers that didn't require a mask, and that's where the classroom outbreak took place, and that's where the COVID-19 case took place. They would say to us, well, you didn't do what you should do as a school division to keep those kids safe. That worries me a lot. I hope it doesn't happen, but it could, and I feel like honestly, I feel like no matter how we say recommend, require, or mandate, we've got to be prepared for that one case that could happen that said we did not do everything that we could do to keep everyone safe. That's the point I'm coming across from as well.
And I think there's an issue of whose name's first on the lawsuit that follows that. Is it my name and then your name and then their names, or do you all get the first due on that document? Yeah, we gotta think, this is a valid point. You know,
Given that we are in Wild West territory with regard to COVID-19 litigation, I mean, we could sit here and try to.
We could.
That will be for the next.
Yeah, and
Until the camera runs out of bounds.
Yeah, and I really am not concerned about litigation. I'm concerned about people catching COVID-19. That's my one big concern right now. Sally?
Sally, can I have something?
Yes, this is Sally Wolf, our school nurse. Go ahead.
I have learned, and my thoughts and feelings about this has evolved and has ultimately changed. One of the speakers that we talk to frequently from the Virginia Department of Health, Joanna Pitts, she always puts things in the perspective of what's good, what's better, and what's best. Good is social distance, would be social distancing. Better would be a mask at intervals with the social distancing. But the best thing we could do for our children and to possibly prevent a case of COVID-19 is to wear the mask at all times as well as social distancing.
I was going to say, one of those documents you sent us said that.
It said that.
Yeah.
It did.
Said that the best case scenario.
It did.
So, do we feel like there needs to be anything added
I think so.
or
About the-
wording change before we move
Yeah.
on it?
I think we did.
Honestly, the blanket nature of it, if we think that allowing breaks or, and if that's going to be handled at the school level by the principals, then something should be in there. I don't, first of all, I want the policy to be clear. If that is going to include a measure of flexibility at the school level, then I think it probably needs to be spelled out as clearly as we can, because we don't want people confused, especially with regard to mask breaks, where they may occur. You don't want to rewrite the Constitution on something like that, but it should be.
The least amount of confusion is probably the best.
It definitely needs to be in the letter. It does. And I personally, when I was thinking about breaks, I wasn't thinking about in the classroom. I was thinking more or less.
Like going to the bathroom or?
Definitely,
Okay.
definitely. But it needs to
Or
be
to the
stated
lunch.
there.
I mean, when they're eating.
Yeah, it needs to be stated there, because right now, you just feel so confined in what we see before us. So before, Jonathan said, it needs to be straightforward, no confusion. And I think that would help with some of the other things that we have talked about.
Right, and I didn't mean to add another layer to this, but if you look at all 3 schools in that age group or grade groups, they're going at different lengths of time throughout the day, and so many days per week this week and the following. So that's something too to consider, because these kids are there every day, these kids are there every other week, and these kids are there for 3 hours per day, 4 days a week. So the expectation of each of those different groups is a little bit different. One group might say, well, I don't have it too bad, that's not bad, I can accept that. And you have another group that's like, well, I'm here all day. And again, I'm not advocating one side or the other, I'm just saying we have to be prepared. Ms. Hale.
I did a lot of work on that policy, so I'll speak to it for a second. I think the best way to do it is to let the building principals decide you're going to get 2 breaks a day or 3 breaks, whatever it is, based on how long you're in the building. You space it out, and you delineate when can you have your mask off, where are you when you have your mask off, and you say, these are the times you can have your mask off, and the principal tells those teachers, this will be allowed, this will not be allowed, and these are the times it can happen, and these are the times it cannot happen. And these are the situations it could happen, and so forth. I think we always have to put health first. I think the time that we don't put health first, we've sent a really bad message to the community, to our students, to our staff, to our teachers, and to everyone. And I'm a medical professional and a teacher. So I'm speaking on both, and I'm a parent. I've got that 3rd grader, that 5th grader, that kindergartner, that 1st grader that you were talking about. And they know you're doing this not for yourself, you're doing this for someone else.
And Ms. Hale, I'll agree with you. I'm just saying you need to put that verbiage in there.
Right.
And you're
I
right,
think
the
if you
principals.
If you say, we will allow
Definitely.
set number of breaks during the day, and this will be delineated by the principals of each building, or
Definitely.
I think that's
Definitely.
A good way to say
The
it.
only thing that I would caution us against, though, is creating a 3/4 page, 1-page document that we're expecting children to know, or providing such variation there, either from building to building or whatever, that it becomes somewhat confusing on enforcement.
And I'll agree with you.
Right.
I really do. But there again, teachers are key. Teachers are key. How you present that information. If I'm over in the elementary school, my kid's not going to know about the high school. They really aren't. So everyone's going to follow the same protocol. But
Well,
you're right.
to Ms. Hale's point, though, I mean, each principal would develop their own protocol there.
Of the wins and the wheres
wheres.
and the
The wins
scenarios.
and the wins and the wheres, and I can, might be slightly overblown, but I could see that document
And I think-
growing to the point
And I
where
think to the
it's
individuals
cumbersome.
or the parents or students that oppose it, that would be easier for them
That's what
to be more accepting
Yes.
of it.
Yes.
That
The
makes
more,
sense.
the
That's a
more
really
straight
good-
line and
I think so.
straightforward your policy,
Yeah.
the better it is able to be both abided by and enforced. And that's sort of what I'm a little concerned about, is that the more layers that we
Right.
add to this, that's the more ways that it can be lawyered against.
Just
That
keep
way.
it simple, and I think they will. Ms. Hunter?
I just wanted to say, I understand both sides, but I think kids are resilient, and they'll do whatever they're told. And then in that policy also, we're going to have, and if it is not done, you're going to have the steps in it.
Well,
A warning, or,
I think that would be up to the
Virtual.
principal
but I do, but anyway, I do believe that. I wanted to know, like, if visitors come, whatever policy we take,
No.
are we gonna say
Yes.
all visitors must wear a
Yes,
mask?
yes.
Yes.
Temperature checks, entrance, all those things.
Okay.
And whenever possible, for the majority of the encounters with the public, there will be no public in the building. If a parent needs to pick up a child that might be sick for whatever reason, our plan is to have that child escorted to the parent wherever that parent may be, not enter the building. If a parent needs to enter the building to talk to the school nurse, they will make an appointment and they will be temperature checked and all those things. There will be screening. If a worker comes in, and we've had workers come in here and other buildings, they have their temperatures taken, they have a screening to do, we have a record of everybody, and we expect everyone to follow the mask policy.
Right. So, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Excuse me.
I feel like masks should be all the time, but I do want to say, we have a situation where it's mouth to mouth. Like Autumn Anderson had to give CPR mouth to mouth to the little girl.
Yes, ma'am. I'm gonna let Sally answer that when you're finished.
Okay. No, I mean, I'm just curious. We don't want this to be prolonged because, you know, after you start reading half a sheet, you lose interest. But there's some things I think
And you
that-
do
The
CPR.
mask would have to come off for that situation, that's life or death. Anytime there's an immediate threat to life, gloves
not my
are off,
mask.
things will change. So I think you would handle the situation just as you normally would.
Right.
And then.
Okay, now I just wanted to
So-
make sure that was open.
When exigent circumstances present themselves, a specific type of person typically rises to the occasion to help solve that situation or help whatever individual is involved. And they don't care, not that they don't care about the consequences, but what they're doing is they're putting somebody else's life in front of theirs. So if those exigent circumstances do exist, I'm sure that our staff or other individuals will put their training, will revert to their training and do whatever it takes to preserve life or,
No, I just
you know,
wanted.
yeah. And so, and they would do that regardless of the situation.
Right.
So,
yes.
and I think there will probably be instances where there's exigent circumstances, may not severe, you know, life-threatening, that you will see the removal of the mask has to take place. But it's, you can articulate why that would have to happen. Whether it's a discipline thing or whatever it is. Those situations are going to present themselves. Even though this would be in place, I don't think every situation is going to, you know, fall into that. So you'll have that. And everybody's going to have to be understanding and accepting of that if this is the route that we take.